The Kansas City Chiefs had an off day up at St. Joe on Tuesday, but that doesn't mean we have an off day here at KCSN Update, as I'm going to get you up to date on everything you need to know for the Kansas City Chiefs and around the league injury-wise. Got a lot of interesting stuff going around the league on the injury front, and then we're going to get to the podium and hear all of the best quotes and nuggets from the podium on Monday. This is KCSN Update presented by DraftKings.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome into today's KCSN Update for August the 1st. I'm Tucker Franklin, super stoked to be with you here to get you caught up on everything you need to know for the Kansas City Chiefs. As I mentioned in the intro, not a whole lot going on the Chiefs front, as they did have an off day at training camp on Tuesday, but it's a good day to get caught up on some things that we might have missed on Monday, as there's a very heavy defensive day at the podium. All defensive players we're going to hear from on today's show. I'll get you caught up on that. But first, I want to talk about some of the injury news going around the league, because there's been some big injuries going on, and it's been mildly concerning, I think, when you start to look at the names that have been injured on some of these high-profile teams. But as you already know with the Kansas City Chiefs, they've been dealing with injuries of their own. Najee Johnson, a guy that I know Steve Spagnuolo was very high on. We're going to hear from Steve Spagnuolo later on in the show. He talked very highly of Najee Johnson. They're not going to have him for the rest of the season. Isaiah Moore, an undrafted free agent that they did sign after the draft this year, they're not going to have him. Also with a knee injury down, those two guys. But very unfortunate is Kadarius Toney, also dealing with a knee issue, had a meniscus cleanup, and he's been out for some time. Treshaun Warden coming off of a knee injury last year that he had a torn ACL, taking him a little bit of time to come off of that PUP, that physically unable to perform list, and get up to speed to where he can practice for the Kansas City Chiefs. But a lot of odds and ends injuries too. I think Drew Tranquil was dealing with a neck injury. Nick Bolton was sick. There was a little bit of an illness going around at Chiefs training camp, as Clyde Edwards-Helaire for the past couple days have been sick, but he was back at practice on Monday, as I mentioned on yesterday's video. But let's talk about some of the biggest names kind of around the league that have suffered some injuries. And we can't start this segment without starting with Joe Burrow. Had that calf injury. I'm sure you saw the video of his injury. Very interesting injury that he had there, as he kind of rolls out a little bit. Calf kind of cramps up on him, tightens up, and he doesn't quite finish the rep, goes down to the ground there. But already having the calf wrap up, as I believe head coach said that he was dealing with a little bit of calf pain a little earlier in the week too. So very interesting there. A lot of these lower body injuries. As Jalen Ramsey, another one, a big name that was on the move this offseason. He's with the Dolphins now, has a torn meniscus. He's out until December, according to a lot of reports. He's been going through rehab now, back out at practice. Out till December for Jalen Ramsey. That's a tough one for them. A tough one that happened in the AFC West is Tim Patrick. Now, Tim Patrick was a guy going into last year, had a lot of hype in the fantasy ranks. I think a lot of people were very high on what Tim Patrick could have become with especially Russell Wilson as his quarterback. Now, this was before we knew what Russell Wilson was. But a lot of people were very high on Tim Patrick, and I think I was pretty high on him as well. And I was excited to see what Tim Patrick could do with Russell Wilson this year. But it seems like a refocused Broncos team. It doesn't look like they're going to have Tim Patrick again for this year, which is very disappointing, coming off of a torn ACL last year in training camp. It appears that he injures his Achilles this year's practice. They haven't officially placed him on the IR. I think it's all but a formality at this point, but very tough news coming out of Broncos camp there. Very unfortunate to see those guys out there that, we're going to compete at a very high level against Patrick Mahomes, the Kansas City Chiefs, go down. I mean, you hate to see the injuries go down. The Chiefs are at a spot now where you want to take teams' best shots. You want to see the team's best players, and you want to have that competition week in and week out, especially for the Broncos. I mean, if they would have had Tim Patrick back and healthy, those 2 weeks and those 2 games in 3 weeks could have been really interesting, and they're going to be important regardless, but very interesting. So let's go to the running back ranks, because that's a very interesting topic this offseason has been the running backs, how they're going to get paid, everything like that. Saquon Barkley takes a very odd deal for like about $1 million more than the franchise tag, but nevertheless, he takes that 1-year deal. Nyheim Hines, a guy who was actually involved in a trade last year. He tears his ACL, but it was in a non-football related event. I believe he was on hit by a jet ski, tears his ACL in that regard. He's going to be out for the season. And, a guy who was also on the Buffalo Bills, Zach Moss, now with the Colts, who they've got a lot of running back controversy of their own. He has a broken arm. He's out 4 to 6 weeks. So injuries abundant in camp. I don't know. I've seen a lot of people speculate about it being the CBA, about them not having as many contact days. So when they do have contact days, their bodies aren't necessarily ready for it. I'm no scientist, so I'm not going to speculate on that. I do think it's really interesting that we're seeing a lot of injuries early on in training camp this year. I don't know if it's a correlation or causation of anything necessarily, just an interesting trend to notice, I think, so far in this year. It sucks to see, as I mentioned. There's a lot of guys on those lists that I really love to watch play football that aren't going to get to play football for a whole lot of time, but very disappointing. But let's go ahead. Let's get to the pressers from the Chiefs press conference on Monday. As I mentioned, a very heavy defensive day that I have for you. I think I've got all defensive quotes down here on my sheet that we'll get to talk to. We're going to hear from Steve Spagnuolo. We're going to hear from Drue Tranquill, a guy who I really thought did really well at the podium, and I love to hear what he has to say. I'm very high personally on Drue Tranquill. I think he will be a great addition for this Kansas City Chiefs team. And also Felix Anudike-Uzomah, the first-round pick for the Kansas City Chiefs this last season. But let's go ahead and start off with Steve Spagnuolo talking about a potential Nazeeh Johnson replacement and how well Nazeeh was doing in camp. And here's what he had to say about who's going to step up and take the role that Nazeeh left.
I mean, all those guys are playing really. Nick's one you brought up. Echo, I thought, had a really good day the other day. And all, Boodle always gives us everything he's got. Somebody's going to have to surface, that's for sure. We do have guys with some experience now. That would have been a little different a year ago, right? If you start having injuries there, we were all young. I'm really sad to see that happen to NJ. He was really climbing. If you guys notice, he was taking reps with the first group because he had earned it. And he's got a really good corner skill set. I mean, he played safety in college, but so hopefully, we'll pray he gets healthy real quick and gets back. Yeah.
Let's keep it with Spags here as he hits on Drue Tranquill and his addition to this Kansas City Chiefs team. And he talks about why he liked him in Kansas City and why he wanted to bring him on this team and what he's done so far in camp.
I mean, look, we know he's a guy that's played in the league, right? He's been a starter. And so we try to find spots to get him out there right away. We've got pretty good players there in base now. But we got some packages and we can do some things with him. We'll kind of see how that all evolves. But it's nice to have. It's really nice to have.
Now let's get to Drue Tranquill. Here's what he had to say about being in Kansas City for this camp and how he's kind of been adjusting to the new team this year.
Well, man, it's an honor to be here and playing for Coach Spags and the defending champs. And we just have so many great guys in that room that I'm trying to learn from each and every day. It's certainly different than the defense I played in LA, but football is football, and you pick up on things as you go throughout your career. And certainly there's things during my time at Notre Dame and throughout my time in the league that I've picked up on that have kind of helped me, translate and learn this defense, but it's a process nonetheless.
I got a couple really good quotes here from Drue Tranquill. He talks about why he chose Kansas City specifically, and there was a lot of teams in him. I'll let him tell you how many he had in on him kind of from the free agency process and what made him feel seen, what made him feel special in Kansas City. Here's what he had to say about these questions.
There was, at any given time, there was probably 10 or 11 teams involved, and as dominoes fell, that list shrunk, but there was about 5-6 teams that last day I was kind of choosing between. And I think just talking to Coach Spags, talking to Brett Veach, talking to Andy Reid, I just felt really valued here. Felt like they were going to use a lot of my strengths, maximize me as a player here, and that excited me and ultimately led to my decision to come here.
Is there added juice when you go from one division team to another?
Certainly, yeah. You can't wait to play them, for sure. I mean, I think just my versatility as a linebacker, my ability to cover, my ability to rush, my ability to play the run, and my instincts. That's one thing you can't teach physically, is instincts. And out of any position on the defense, maybe you have to have the most of, it's linebacker when it comes to instincts. And so I think all of those things, along with some intangibles, some leadership, I think they saw those, they affirmed those in me throughout the process, and I certainly agreed with them and felt like this was the best place for me.
Good stuff there from Drue. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, Nick Bolton was out one of these practices as with the sickness that's been going around up at camp. And in Nick Bolton's absence, somebody had to step up and take that green dot role. That was Drue Tranquill. And he got to talk about his experience doing that green dot. And I don't think it was his first experience with the Chiefs doing the green dot, as he had some time in OTAs to take over. And here's what he had to say about how he thought that whole process went.
Yeah, I thought it went really well. I thought guys were lined up. We were playing fast. Certainly there's always corrections to make, but it felt smooth, felt comfortable, felt a lot better than the spring when I was learning it for the first time.
All right, let's get to the first round rookie. Not a whole lot of buzz about Felix Anudike-Uzomah coming into it. So Steve Spagnuolo talks about what he's seen from FAU and kind of why maybe we haven't seen a whole or heard a whole lot of buzz from Felix.
At any position on defense, in my opinion, there's going to be a learning curve, right? Everything's new. You know, the speed of the game, you know, who they're going to go against, learning the guys they're going to line up against. You got to get through defeating your own offensive line and offensive team first. You got to learn a playbook. And I think where he got behind was one thing about off-season. You know, as defensive coaches, we complain you can't do real football, right? But the one thing about the off-season is you can get a lot of the mental part, get a base, and he didn't have that initially. He's playing catch-up right now.
Felix was also at the podium on Monday. He gave a little bit of a rundown how camp has been for him so far as he tries to catch up for missing those OTAs.
Affected me quite a bit. Not gonna lie, because a lot of the rookies obviously had to learn technique-wise, going the field full speed and stuff like that, and I had to like jump back because of my injuries and stuff like that. But now I'm in here. Now I'm in training camp, so it's just training camp's a great time to be. Time to get your footwork down, get everything down, so to be ready for the preseason and the season.
All right, let's wrap up with this one last quote from Steve Spagnuolo talking about the heated exchanges. Now, Travis Kelce and these defensive players have kind of been going at it if you've been following. During these padded practices, there's been a couple skirmishes where Travis Kelce takes exception to some of these guys coming in to punch the ball out after the play, just being really aggressive. And I think that's the way that Steve Spagnuolo wants these guys to play, to fly around and be aggressive at the ball. Travis Kelce, in his, I don't want to say old age, but in his older age, probably has enough of these young guys punching him in the arms after he's come down with a catch and they're just going through reps in practice. And he's had enough of it a couple times where he has taken exception to it. Here's what Steve Spagnuolo had to say about these heated exchanges.
The one thing about, I'm talking about the whole team now, the one thing about all our guys, I think, in my opinion, they all respect each other. And so when it gets heated for a moment, you know, that's just the competitive juices and some pride coming out. But I always see them kind of take care of it afterwards, and that's the best thing.
That's going to do it for today's episode of KCS Update. Really appreciate you guys watching all the way to the end of the video. And as always, make sure to drop that lock in the comment section so I know that you guys are locked in here at KC Sports Network. Also, hit that like and subscribe button if you like what we're doing at KC Sports Network. Once you subscribe, you become a first teamer. And who doesn't want to be a first teamer? Everyone who subscribes to KCSN is that first teamer. So really appreciate you guys hanging out with me, getting caught up of what's going on with the Kansas City Chiefs, especially on this off day. I know there's not a whole lot of content you can take in, but we appreciate you sitting down, hanging out with me here at KC Sports Network. So that's going to do it. If you want my extended conversation with Joshua Briscoe from Sports Radio 810, we talk about the wide receiver room. You can go listen to that on wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm not going to judge you where you listen to your podcast. Go find it. Go listen to it. I sit down with him. We talk about the wide receiver room. What's going to be the kind of the makeup of this with all these injuries coming out, and you know, John Ross retiring, Kadarius Toney's injury, Justin Ross playing incredibly well during camp and putting on a show. We talk about all that and much more on today's KCS Update on the audio side of things. So go check that out. We really appreciate you once again watching all the way to the end of this video. I'm Tucker Franklin. I'll be back tomorrow with another video, so make sure you like and subscribe so you do not miss a video from us here at KC Sports Network. I'll be back tomorrow with another video, so until then, I'll talk to you guys later.